The BRICS account for more than 40% of the global population and nearly a quarter of the world's gross domestic product. Well, Alexandre Kateb is an economist specializing in emerging markets. He joins me now on the set for more. Alexandre, how much is the war in Ukraine and Russia's role in...
We are watching as these countries are willing to be seen with Russia. What kind of outcomes do you expect You were detailing, of course, some of the complexity of the various relationships between India and China, but what about with Russia on the whole?
This week, remember BRICS? They were meant to transform the global economic order.
How the BRICS, India and Saudi Arabia are playing global chess. How Saudi Arabia can join the BRICS. Saudi Arabia is the largest economy in the Arab world. It has a population of more than 35 million people and its GDP is almost 1 trillion. The country also has a lot of potential, but it's not being used to its fullest possibilities, as many international actors are reluctant to support their strategic and political alliances. Saudi Arabia is one of the wealthiest countries in the world, but still needs to work on diversifying its economy and improving its education system to be able to compete with other emerging economies, such as China and Russia. The country, however, has been a member of the G20 for many years. But despite these factors, Saudi Arabia is not a member of BRICS. Therefore, today, the country's economy is already heavily dependent on oil exports. Recently, Saudi Arabia has been invited to join the BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, as a full member. The invitation was extended at the BRICS summit in Johannesburg by Russian President Vladimir Putin. The BRICS is an association of 5 major emerging national economies: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It was established in 2006 with the aim of discussing economic cooperation among its members and other countries. Saudi Arabia has been a member of the G20 since its inception in 1999. However, joining the BRICS can give Saudis a political power undisputed in the Arab region. This move, as well, can have an impact in the global structure of power, as Saudi Arabia may not only want to be part of the BRICS, but to adjust with them policies concerning oil and global exchange currency. This implies not only political autonomy or the need to be guided by external opinion, but also the economic potential to realize this goal. Notably, not many countries in the world are able to do that. That said, the mere fact of a technical union of sovereigns did not in itself produce a new framework. Attempts to stimulate economic ties within BRICS were not met with huge enthusiasm. Also, the group was not able to become formalized as a counterbalance to the G7, because the links between them and the West were crucial. However, this situation has changed since, during the last 2 decades, Russia has been pushed to China's side, and Moscow has thus intensified its cooperation with Beijing. Russia's need for cooperation with China at a time of pressure from the West is growing, because Russia will be forced to find new partners in broader terms, feeling that it needs more friends and allies if it is going to resist the pressure from the US-led alliance. In essence, while sanctions are being more strictly imposed in Europe, they are less severe in Russia. The US-led alliance also feels that it needs more allies in order to increase its power. So it is trying to persuade partners and adversaries of the importance of joining their coalition. The result was quite unexpected. All the other countries, especially the big BRICS states or those claiming a role in the world of their own, not only distanced themselves from joining the Western campaign against Russia or Saudi Arabia, but outright rejected it, despite the fact that such a stance carries the risk of repercussions from the US and its allies. This shift in global politics have rapidly rebalanced the role of Saudi Arabia, becoming one of the most important players that bounds the East with the West. Therefore, the power of the countries, India and Saudi Arabia being allies in the BRICS, can change the history of money as we know it. Introduction. What are the friendly economic relations of India and Saudi Arabia? India and Saudi Arabia have had friendly economic relations for a very long time. The two countries are the largest suppliers of oil to each other. India is one of the top 5 export markets for Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia is one of the top 10 import markets in India. Saudi Arabia is one of the largest investors in India, with investments in sectors such as retail, insurance, healthcare, infrastructure, and telecommunications. In 2017, it was ranked as the 2nd largest supplier of investment to India after Mauritius. India's exports to Saudi Arabia include petroleum products and machinery, while imports from Saudi Arabia include crude oil and machinery. Also, Saudi Arabia is the 2nd largest supplier of investment to India, after Mauritius. Saudi Aramco is a major investor in the Indian economy and has invested in sectors such as retail, insurance, healthcare, infrastructure, and telecom. The kingdom's investment account for no less than $8 billion. In 2017, it was ranked as the second largest supplier of investment to India after Mauritius. India's exports to Saudi Arabia include petroleum products and machinery, while imports from Saudi Arabia include machinery, vehicles, and special building materials. India's exports to Saudi Arabia include petroleum products and machinery, while imports from Saudi Arabia include machinery, vehicles, and special building materials. In 2017, it was ranked as the second largest supplier of investment to India after Mauritius. India to Saudi Arabia trade and investment overview. India and Saudi Arabia have had cordial relations for many years, being India one of the largest buyers of crude oil to Saudi Arabia, while Saudi Arabia is one of the top suppliers of crude oil to India. Some of the bilateral agreements signed between India and Saudi Arabia include also the India to Saudi Arabia Joint Commission for Scientific and Technological Cooperation, JSC, originally established on March 20th, 2004. The Saudi Aramco, Indian Oil Corporation Joint Ventures Company Limited, SAPP JVC, was registered on January 2nd, 1999. Saudi Aramco Overseas Company signed an agreement with Indian Overseas Petroleum Corporation Limited's Exploration Division, which is in charge of the exploration and production in India. These ties represent just the beginning of a relationship that is increasingly assessed by many countries in the West as strategic, especially in a time when the dollar is seen with slight mistrust in the international community. India and Saudi Arabia are both members of the World Trade Organization WTO and are signatories to various multilateral trading agreements. The two countries have signed a number of bilateral agreements on trade in goods, services and investments, etc. India and Saudi Arabia have agreed to promote trade in a wide variety of goods, including petroleum products and petrochemicals, natural gas, fertilizers, plastics, and textiles. Also, the two countries agreed to promote cooperation in the field of energy technologies. In addition, both countries have signed an MOU on cooperation between the Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai, and King Abdulaziz University, KAU, to strengthen cooperation in applied science, engineering, and technology. In the meeting with his Saudi counterpart, Prime Minister Modi also noted that close bilateral relations have been beneficial for both countries and urged deeper engagement in trade and investments between the two nations. India has traditionally had strong economic ties with Saudi Arabia. Last year, India exported $5 billion worth of goods to Saudi Arabia, while $3 billion worth of goods were imported into India from the Gulf nation. The Saudis also hold a stake in India's biggest state-owned oil company, ONGC Videsh Limited, as well as a 20% stake in another state-owned firm, the Indian Railways. India to Saudi Arabia economic cooperation in the future. Saudi Arabia and India are two of the most important countries in the world for traders and businessmen. Trade with Saudi Arabia will be beneficial for both countries, and greater cooperation between them will further their mutual interests. The Saudi Arabian government is wisely taking steps to upgrade their infrastructure. This will not only increase their prosperity, but it will also create greater opportunities for Indian companies in Saudi Arabia. The increasing escalation of the war between Ukraine and Russia has shifted, however, the global balance of global politics, as Saudi Arabia has decided to define the price despite the already big pressures coming from the United States. This decision ignited a lot of conflict in the West that oftentimes criticized the double standards of the American economy when dealing with political systems not openly recognized as part of the liberal democratic alliances. The decision of Saudi Arabia as well played in the direction of the interests of India, who suddenly became the single most important buyer of Russian gas, after Europe decided to block the imports of Russian assets to their territory. In sum, both Saudi Arabia and India become one of the major winners of the war, remaining also as great partners in the relationship of India with the Middle East region. This friendship also improved rapidly, the geostrategic positioning of the Middle East as deeper and more open alliances formed upon the economic interests of Eastern Europe, the Middle East and Asia. In sum, the possibility of an expansion of the BRICS, the geopolitical importance of Saudi Arabia as the largest crude importer, and the outstanding potential of India in global politics are configuring a long-term chess game that few analysts are able to identify. The future of this political relation as well can bring big changes in global politics. If the Western world is not able to understand this new reality, the planet and the economy can change more rapidly than expected. Are we really prepared to see this? That is it for today, folks. I hope you liked this video. For more updates on this topic, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Remember, capitalism is about creating value, not money. See you all soon with more interesting information. Till then, see you.